The stranger handed him the photograph. John Wayne's hand froze in midair. And without a word, he turned and walked away. New Mexico. August 1968. The desert stretched flat and endless in every direction, heat rising in visible waves off the sand. Monument Valley's iconic rock formation stood sentinel in the distance. A film crew of 60 people worked under the merciless sun, building the final scenes of a western that would never be remembered as well as this single afternoon. John Wayne stood in full costume. Weathered hat. Leather vest dark with sweat. Gun belt heavy at his waist. At 61 years old, he was still the Duke, still the man America believed could win any fight, ride any horse, face any danger without flinching. He was between takes. Standing in the shade of a wooden false-front building, drinking water from a tin cup, talking quietly with the director about the next setup. The usual rhythm of a film set. Cameras being repositioned. Extras milling about in period costume. Someone calling for more reflectors to bounce the harsh sunlight. A man approached from beyond the perimeter. Not part of the crew. Civilian clothes, plain button-down shirt, slacks covered in desert dust. 50s, maybe? Face weathered by more than just sun. He carried something in both hands, held carefully like an offering. Security moved to intercept him, but the man called out. "Mr. Wayne? Please! I just need 1 minute." Wayne looked up. Something in the man's voice, not aggressive, not starstruck. Something else. Something familiar in a way Wayne couldn't place. He waved security off. "It's all right." The man walked forward slowly, stopping about 6 feet away. Close enough to speak without shouting. Far enough to show he meant no threat. "Mr. Wayne," the man said again. "My name is Thomas Brennan. I was in the Pacific. Iwo Jima. February 1945. Wayne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He nodded once. "Thank you for your service." "I'm not here for thanks," Thomas said quietly. He extended his hands. The photograph. Old. Black and white. Edges worn soft by decades. "I'm here because of this." Wayne reached out. His hand moved slowly, as if pulling towards something he didn't want to touch. His fingers were 6 inches from the photograph when he saw what it showed. 4 young men in Marine uniforms. Standing in front of a tent. Rifles propped against their shoulders. Grinning at the camera with the particular recklessness of boys who haven't yet understood what war actually means. Wayne's hand stopped moving. His entire body went rigid. Thomas held the photograph steady. "Second from the left," he said. "That's my brother Danny. He was 19. Wayne didn't take the photograph. Didn't move. His eyes were locked on that image, on those 4 young faces frozen in 1945. "He talked about you," Thomas continued. "In his letters home. He said you'd visited the base before they shipped out. Said you shook every Marine's hand. Told them they were the real heroes. Said you wished you could be going with them." Wayne's throat worked. No words came out. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The film set had gone quiet. 60 people pretending to work while actually watching. The director took a step forward, concerned, but Wayne's stunt coordinator, a former Marine himself, put a hand on his arm and shook his head slightly. "Not yet. Danny died on the 3rd day," Thomas said, his voice still quiet, still steady. "Took shrapnel from a mortar. He was carrying ammunition to a machine gun nest. They gave him a Bronze Star posthumously." Wayne's hands had dropped to his sides. He was staring at the photograph like it was a sentencing document. "I'm not here to blame you," Thomas said. "I know you tried to enlist. I know they classified you 3A because of your age and your dependence. I know you did everything you could to serve." He paused. "But Danny's last letter home mentioned you," he said. "At least the Duke believes in what we're doing. At least he'll tell the story right." The photograph was still extended between them. An offering. An accusation? A question that had waited 23 years to be asked? Wayne finally moved. He took the photograph, held it with both hands, looked at those 4 young faces, boys who'd gone to war while he'd stayed behind and played pretend soldiers on sound stages. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Which one is Danny?" "Second from the left." Wayne studied the face. 19 years old. Grinning. Alive. "He looks like he was a good Marine." "He was a kid who believed what you told him," Thomas said. No anger. Just fact. They all were. Wayne nodded slowly. He looked up at Thomas Brennan. This man who'd carried his brother's photograph for 23 years, who'd somehow found him on a film set in the New Mexico desert, who'd traveled however far to hand him this particular piece of the past. "I'm sorry," Wayne said. 2 words. Quiet. Absolute. Then he turned. Walked away from Thomas, from the crew, from the cameras and the costumes and the pretend violence. He walked past the false front buildings, past the equipment trucks, out into the open desert where there was nothing but sand and heat and distance. No one followed him. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Wayne walked for maybe 200 yards. Found a large rock and sat down heavily. Still holding the photograph. Still looking at those 4 young faces. He'd been 29 years old when Pearl Harbor happened. Father of 4 children. Married. Making B-westerns for Republic Pictures. He tried to enlist, had actually gone to the recruitment office 3 times. Each time they classified him 3A, essential industry. Dependents. Too old for combat duty. John Ford had gotten a commission. Jimmy Stewart had flown bombing missions over Germany. Clark Gable had served. Even directors and character actors had found ways to put on the uniform. But not John Wayne. John Wayne had stayed behind and made movies. Had visited training camps and shaken hands and posed for photographs with boys about to ship out. Had smiled and told them they were heroes and wished them luck. Had watched them leave. And then had spent the next 4 years playing soldiers. Winning pretend battles. Delivering speeches about sacrifice and duty and American courage while real men like Danny Brennan, were dying in places whose names Wayne learned from newsreels. The war had ended. Wayne's career had exploded. He'd become the symbol of American masculinity, of frontier strength, of the man who always did what was right. He'd made 50 westerns and war films. Had won an Oscar. Had become an icon. But he'd never forgotten. Never stopped feeling the weight of it. The men who'd gone while he'd stayed. The photographs in his fan mail. Mothers sending pictures of sons who'd loved his movies and then died in jungles and on beaches Wayne would never see except through a camera lens. He'd tried to atone. Had visited veterans' hospitals. Had championed military causes. Had made films that honored servicemen. Had played soldiers with a ferocity that some critics called overacting but that Wayne knew was something else, a kind of penance performed in front of millions. But it was never enough. How could it be? He wore costumes. They'd worn real uniforms. He fired blanks. They'd face real bullets. He went home to his family every night. They'd gone home in boxes or not at all. Thomas Brennan's brother Danny. 19 years old. Dead on Iwo Jima while John Wayne was on a soundstage in Hollywood. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. He sat on that rock for 3 hours. The sun moved across the sky. The director sent someone to check on him twice. Both times Wayne waved them away. He needed this time. This silence. This reckoning. When he finally walked back to the set, the photograph was folded carefully in his vest pocket. His face was composed again. The Duke mask back in place. But something had shifted beneath it. He found Thomas Brennan. The man was sitting in the shade near the craft services truck, drinking coffee, waiting. Wayne approached slowly. Sat down beside him without asking. They sat in silence for a long moment. I'd like to keep this, Wayne finally said, patting his vest pocket where the photograph rested. If that's all right with you. That's why I brought it, Thomas said. Why now? Why here? Thomas considered the question. Because I've been carrying my brother for 23 years. Every time I see one of your movies, I think about what Danny said. About you telling the story right. And I realized, you've been carrying them too, haven't you? All those boys. Wayne's jaw clenched. Not the same as carrying a real burden. Isn't it? Thomas looked at him directly. You think guilt isn't heavy just because you're still alive to carry it? They sat in silence again. Desert wind moving across the sand. The film crew maintaining a respectful distance. Danny would have liked your movies, Thomas said eventually. He loved westerns. Used to pretend he was a cowboy when we were kids. Wayne smiled slightly. Most Marines I've met hated westerns. Said they were too slow. Danny wasn't most Marines. He was a kid who believed in heroes. Thomas stood, brushing dust from his pants. I should go. I've taken enough of your time. Wayne stood too. Extended his hand. Thomas shook it. A firm grip between two men who understood weight. Mr. Brennan, Wayne said. Would you do something for me? What's that? Come to the premiere. When this film comes out. Be my guest. Let me introduce you to people as Thomas Brennan, brother of Marine Danny Brennan, hero of Iwo Jima. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Wayne reached into his vest pocket. Pulled out a business card. Wrote something on the back. Handed it to Thomas. My personal number. Call when you're ready. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. Thomas Brennan left. The film crew tried to resume work. But Wayne stood there for another 10 minutes, hand over his vest pocket where the photograph rested, looking out at the desert. When he finally called for the cameras to roll again, something had changed in his performance. The director noticed it immediately. A weight. A gravity. Wayne had always been good, but now there was something else, a kind of moral seriousness that transcended the script. That night, in his trailer, Wayne took out the photograph. Studied those 4 young faces. Read the names Thomas had written on the back: Danny Brennan, Marcus Cole, Joseph Yamamoto, Robert Henderson. He learned their stories, found their families, wrote letters, made calls. For the rest of his life, 13 more years until cancer took him in 1979, Wayne kept that photograph in whatever he was wearing. Vest pocket. Jacket pocket. Even in his hospital gown at the end, tucked in the drawer beside his bed. He never spoke about it publicly. Never used it for publicity. It wasn't for show. It was for him. A reminder. A burden he'd chosen to carry because carrying it was the only honest thing he could do. Thomas Brennan came to that film premiere. Wayne introduced him to everyone, studio executives, actors, journalists, as the brother of a hero. Had Thomas stand for recognition. The applause lasted 2 full minutes. They stayed in touch. Christmas cards. Occasional phone calls. When Wayne was dying in 1979, one of his last visitors was Thomas Brennan, now an old man himself, coming to sit beside his bed and tell him stories about Danny that had nothing to do with war. Just a kid. Just a brother. The photograph was buried with Wayne. In the pocket of the jacket he wore in his casket. For young Marines, frozen in 1945, going into the earth with the man who'd spent 3 decades trying to honor them. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Thomas Brennan died in 1991. His family found letters from John Wayne, dozens of them, spanning 13 years. In one, Wayne had written, I carried Danny with me. Not as penance. As privilege. He trusted me to tell it right. I'm still trying. The photograph stayed with Wayne until the end. When he was buried in 1979, it rested in his jacket pocket, 4 young Marines finally at peace with the man who'd carried their memory. Wayne never spoke about that day in the desert publicly. But everyone on that film set remembered. The 3 hours he sat alone. The way he walked back different. The weight he carried for the rest of his life. Not as atonement. As honor. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. In 2011, the Brennan family donated Danny's Bronze Star to the John Wayne Museum. Beside it, they placed a replica of the photograph. The plaque reads, "Carried by 2 men who understood that the heaviest burdens are often invisible." Guilt doesn't make you weak. What you do with it defines who you are. Wayne understood that. And he carried it right.